Good morning, everybody. Now, it's 1 year since the attacks on Israel on October the 7th last year. Obviously, what happened on that day was horrendous for everybody who was killed and the families of the people who were killed there in southern Israel. And Hamas was completely at fault for doing this. But since then, the reaction of the nation of Israel has been completely out of proportion to what happened. It was horrendous that 1,200 people died on that day. But since then, the nation of Israel has killed 41,000 people in Gaza and started the invasion of Lebanon, the carpet bombing of various areas in southern Lebanon and Beirut, and already 4,000 people plus have died in Lebanon in the last week or two since that action has happened. Not to mention also bombing Syria, bombing apartment blocks in Tehran to kill the leader of Hamas there, and the bombing in Lebanon was to kill the leader of Hezbollah. So we just have a continual spiral of escalation here since October the 7th, and it's getting out of control. And I am someone who has not commented at all on the Middle East until October the 7th last year. And I don't really want to talk about the Middle East because it's not my problem. It's not my issue, really, because I live in the UK. The people in the Middle East have got to sort their own problems out. But it's horrendous to see two sides killing each other and the escalation of violence and aggression just going off the charts, and it doesn't seem to be stopping or going to stop anytime soon. The reason I'm making this video today is because this has spilled out onto the streets of London as well, because what's happening in the Middle East does affect what's happening in the UK, also affects what's happening in other countries around the West and around the world as well. So there were protests this week in London, and there was a big protest, pro-Palestine protest. You could call it an anti-genocide protest, which is what the people there would call it, anti-ethnic cleansing protest. People who were against Palestine, seemingly pro-Israel, are smearing it as a hate march. And I find that quite disturbing that people I know in my area of politics who generally support free speech are actually smearing a march against more killing in Gaza and Lebanon and Israel as well. As a hate march. It's not a hate march. It's a march against violence, aggression, and genocide. And I wasn't there. I don't go on these marches for Palestine or for Israel. They're not my business. I don't go there. But I don't like to see people twisting the idea of free speech and being anti-free speech when it's something that people don't like. I mean, how many times have we said free speech is for everybody, even for people whose ideas you find offensive and you don't like? And then the very same people I know, are then turning around and saying, but they're not allowed free speech because they're marching for Palestine. Okay, I don't agree with everything that everybody is saying on those marches, but a lot of people are there from good intentions because they don't want more people to be killed. And 41,000 people have been killed so far in Gaza, approximately. And those are figures from the UN. So, you know, it's difficult to dispute them. Then there was a pro-Israel march also going on. 30,000 people, I think, attended that, and then they were, saying the other people are hateful, and then, they're all sort of pointing the finger at each other, and various people are saying, they made a gesture, are they going to be arrested? Oh, they held up this placard, aren't they going to be arrested? Both people accusing the other side of breaking hate speech laws, and it's kind of descended into a childish playground kind of farce where everybody is saying they're hateful, they're hateful, they're hateful. Where are the police? The police are not doing anything to arrest people for speech or words. Really, are we not more mature than this, that we can allow other people to protest Both sides have a right to protest and say what they want, as long as they're not inciting violence, as long as they're not inciting crime. And if someone says something that you find offensive, just ignore it and move on, because, you giving them attention is what they want, and can we get out of this rut of trying to say, I don't like what they're saying, they should be arrested. I mean, if we do this, we're no better than the cultural Marxist far left, if we do that. So there are these protests for both sides on the streets of London, and I'm sure on the streets of cities around the world, about what's going on in the Middle East. Some people are emotionally supportive of Israel, and other people are very emotionally supportive of Palestine. There's a lot of strong emotions around this on both sides. And again, I can understand, if you're Jewish, you would support the state of Israel. If you're Muslim or Arab, you'd probably support Palestine, and have more of a feeling, a connection to people in Palestine. But if you're not, I don't understand why people are getting emotional about one side or the other. It's like, all I want is for people to stop killing each other. But at the moment, most of the killing is being done by the state of Israel. And, we have to recognize that. What happened on the 7th of October was horrible. Of course it was. 1,200 people died. Many of them actually by what you might call friendly fire. The Nova Festival, which was the first place that Hamas attacked after they came across an unattended border, which was very strange. The most secure border in the world was left unattended for 7 hours on the 50th anniversary of the beginning of the Yom Kippur War on 7th of October. How did that happen? When the Egyptians and the Americans both warned Israel, Hamas is up to something, they're going to be doing something big, and then they pulled their soldiers off the border so they could just walk across. Somebody was complicit in that from within the Israeli state. But that having been said, Hamas came across anyway. They came across the Nova Festival first. They killed some people there, lots of people there. But lots of people who were killed by Israeli Apache helicopters, who were just firing indiscriminately at both Hamas and the Israeli young people who were there trying to escape, running away, because they operated what's called the Hannibal Protocol, which is kill your own people as well as the hostage takers, so there are no hostages. It's better not to have any hostages than to let someone take hostages. So if someone is being captured, you kill them anyway. I mean, which is really, they've got no chance. Even the Israeli people there have got no chance if they're up against someone in the Israeli Defense Forces who are operating the Hannibal Protocol, and they kill people on their own side, along with the Hamas people. That's what happened, and that's well documented now. That's not a conspiracy theory. It's in Haaretz and other Israeli newspapers. Also, the kibbutz, the Be'eri kibbutz, where I think over 100 people died. And originally there was the story that Hamas had burned babies and decapitated babies, 40 babies. This is absolute rubbish. That didn't happen. It was put out there at the beginning in order to horrify people, to paint them blacker than they were. But that didn't happen. Again, that was friendly fire, if you can call it that, from tanks, from the IDF, shelling all of the buildings there to kill the hostages and the hostage takers inside that kibbutz place, so that they weren't taken as hostages into Gaza. Again, that's been admitted by the Israelis themselves. You can look it up. And the thing is, I say this, people have been given these false lines, in the same way that in Iraq, in the Gulf War, they were told that Saddam Hussein has turned off the incubators to the babies and killed the babies. And that turned out not to be true. And the same thing has happened here about some of the things that were said on October the 7th. And now it's not to say that Hamas were not brutal and horrific in what they did on that day. But some of the stories that came out were embellished and were not true. But since then, we've had mass escalation and many, many more people killed in Palestine and Lebanon. Israel's also bombing Syria, and Netanyahu seems to be champing at the bit to get to war with Iran, which would just be disastrous. I mean, we need to stop this coming Israel-Iran war, because if that happens, there's a potential that it will go nuclear. They would just, Iran and Israel are going to nuke each other if this happens. I don't want that to happen. So I want people to de-escalate. There's been strikes from one side to the other, to the other. Israel bombed an apartment building in Iran. Iran fired some missiles back. Israel's been bombing Beirut, and then Iran fired more missiles back, and now Israel's going to fire more missiles back to Iran and try to destroy its oil infrastructure, and then Iran says it's going to wipe out Israel because it's just a small country, they can destroy its infrastructure in one strike. Do we really want this kind of escalation? No, we don't. We need some cool heads, and we need people to stop these two sides from escalating until everybody's dead. That's basically what we need to do. Whatever has happened in the past, it doesn't matter who started it. The question is, who's going to end it? Who's going to have the maturity to stand up and say, I'm going to end this now. I'm not going to carry on tit for tat, striking back, because we need to end this, because if we carry on escalating, everyone's going to die. That's what we need. What I don't like is the words that are sometimes parroted here, and Netanyahu said this, that this is a war between civilization and barbarism, as though the nation or state of Israel is civilized and everything else is barbarous. And that's simply not true at all. There are many, many millions of Christians living in the Middle East. The majority of Christians in the Holy Land now are Palestinian Christians living in the West Bank. Some Christians living in Gaza as well. Israel's bombed some of the most ancient Christian churches in the world in Gaza. So if you say that everything in Iraq and Syria and Iran is barbarism, I mean, if you said that about anything else at any time, that would be considered immediately racist. But Netanyahu can say that, and he's not challenged. And indeed, some people in the European Commission and other places around have parroted his words, that everything outside Israel in the Middle East is barbarous. I don't agree with that at all. Iran is an ancient nation. Iraq it's a modern state, if you like, created, but it's in the same place as many ancient nations, Syria as well. So to call everyone in the Middle East barbarous is really, it's not helpful, to say the least, and it isn't true. And the idea here by some people in the Israeli state is that they call the Palestinians Amalek, which means that they're subhuman, and the right thing to do to them is wipe them out. And you have literally had people in the Israeli government calling for the whole of all Palestine to be wiped out, all of the Gaza Strip to be wiped out. People have called actually for genocide. Wipe them out and push the remaining people into Egypt so that they're not there anymore. That's genocide. And that's being called for by some people in the Israeli parliament, in the Knesset. And again, I'm not making this up. You can look it up for yourself. It's all there, documented by statements people have made over the last year or so. And, these people expressing that they want genocide really is quite horrific and, dreadful. Because, yes, Hamas are dreadful, but they're killing innocent people. Not everybody in Gaza is Hamas. Most of the people that have been killed by the state of Israel since October the 7th have been women and children. And that's wrong. That's just not right at all. The other thing is, there are hostages, obviously. Hamas took 251 hostages on the 7th of October. 97 of them are left. They still have 97 hostages. They need to be returned. But what they would say, what the other side would say is, well, Israel has taken thousands of hostages. People have been taken from Gaza into Israeli prison camps and prisons. And we actually know that many of them have been treated terribly. They've been tortured. Israel, the nation of Israel, has tortured Palestinian prisoners. They were even debating in the parliament whether it was acceptable to do things to their orifices. Let's put it like that for the video here. I can't say exactly in description what has happened, but that has happened to Palestinian prisoners. They have been had dreadful things happen to them. The dogs have been set onto them. They've been waterboarded. They've been tortured with sticks and other implements in parts of their bodies. That's happened, and that's against all the war crime agreements, the Geneva Convention, every convention, every law, of conduct and in combat. It's against that. You're not allowed to torture prisoners. Especially you're not allowed to do some of the dreadful things that Israeli soldiers have done to Palestinians. I'm not saying that hasn't happened on the other side, but when people say it's all one-sided, that this side is civilized and that side is barbarous, it's simply not true. There's barbarism on both sides, and there are innocent people on both sides who just want to get on with their lives and don't want to be caught up in a war that's escalating to a regional conflict and might go nuclear. And whenever I make a video about these things, about the Middle East, people lose, they say, I don't like what you're saying. I'm not going to follow you anymore. I'm not going to support you anymore. But I think it's important to put out a balanced view and say that there's no good side in this, really. There isn't. What we need is just to get people to stop fighting each other and killing each other. But there is more killing being done by one side than the other. And at the moment, the side that is doing the most killing is the nation state of Israel. And that's just a simple numerical fact. And that needs to be recognized. And we need to try to de-escalate things at every single stage, even if it looks like there's going to be a horrendous regional conflict. We still need to try to de-escalate things and stop people from killing each other in that area of the world. So there you have it. And I just wanted to say this because I can see that the mainstream media in the West has been pushing over the last couple of days a one-sided narrative that there's only one side here that are victims. And yes, the people that were killed and are hostages from the 7th of October are victims, and that's horrendous. But there are victims, many, many more victims on the other side as well, who the Western press seem to be completely ignoring and even celebrating. They're even, they're showing pictures of Beirut being bombed and then carping that this is a wonderful thing. It's not. It's a horrendous thing. And there needs to be more even-handedness here in the Western press and with people involved in commentating and in politics. And to stop saying that side is hateful and that side is like the angels. There's no good side in this. And I only support ordinary people who want to get on with their lives. So there you go. It's the anniversary of the 7th of October. And I hope hostilities can be brought to de-escalation and to an end soon. Although this conflict has been going on since the Nakba in 1948. So the chances of that are low, but we still hope for it anyway. Thanks for listening, everybody.